It had been 3 weeks since the last time he mowed, and honestly, he was okay with that. But one neighbor wasn't. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, folded, formal, and smelling of cheap perfume. A violation? A fine? A deadline. They called his lawn an eyesore, a neglectful eyesore. They said it was bringing down the whole street. What they didn't know was that his grass wasn't growing wild by accident. And in just a few days, that so-called eyesore was going to be the most valuable piece of property in the city. So, who really won in the end? He'd lived on Maple Street for almost 12 years. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people waved from their driveways. His house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a modest 3-bedroom with a slightly overgrown yard. He always promised he'd get to. He worked long hours as a location scout for film studios, driving across the state looking for the perfect backdrop. By the time he got home, he was too tired to care about lawn care. And honestly, neither did anyone else. Until recently, the neighborhood had changed. New families moved in, the old HOA president stepped down, replaced by someone with stricter ideas. There were new rules now. Rules about paint colors, rules about trash cans, rules about grass. His grass had gotten long before, but this time, someone noticed. Someone cared enough to document it. He didn't know it yet, but that patch of uncut grass was about to become the center of a war he never asked for. And the very job that kept him too busy to mow was about to hand him the perfect weapon. The letter arrived in a crisp white envelope with the HOA logo embossed. He opened it at his mailbox, scanning the language. A violation. His grass exceeded 6 inches. He had 14 days to comply or face a $50 fine. He almost laughed. $50. He spent more than that on coffee. He grabbed his trimmer and knocked down the worst of it. Problem solved, or so he thought. 7 days later, another envelope. This time, the language was sharper. The grass had been cut, yes, but not evenly enough. There were patches, clumps. The HOA board had voted to issue a second violation, this time with a $100 fine. He called the HOA president, Margaret, who lived 3 houses down. Her voice was smooth and polished. She explained rules protected property values, exceptions weren't possible, and the board had photographs. When he asked whose property they were taken from, she paused and said it wasn't relevant. He mowed again that weekend. This time, he did it right. He edged the sidewalk. He trimmed around the mailbox. He even swept the clippings into a bag. It took 3 hours, but it was done. Surely this would be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, a certified letter. This one was thicker. Inside, he found a formal notice of a hearing. The board determined his lawn contained weeds, specifically dandelions. 15 of them, each circled in red ink. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Failure to appear would result in automatic fines and possible liens. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at that photograph. Someone had walked onto his grass, knelt down, and circled dandelions. The hearing was held in the community clubhouse, a small building with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. The board sat behind a long table. Margaret was in the middle. She smiled when he walked in. He sat alone. Margaret read the charges aloud. Excessive weed growth. Failure to maintain aesthetic standards. A pattern of neglect. She held up the photograph with the circled dandelions. He tried to explain. He worked long hours. Dandelions were just flowers. Margaret listened patiently, then explained that the rules were the rules. The board had voted. The fines would stand. She handed him a sheet of paper listing approved lawn care companies, suggesting he call one of them soon. He walked out into the warm evening air with that paper crumpled in his fist. The neighborhood looked the same, but something felt different now. Something felt smaller. That night, he sat on his back porch, watching the sun disappear. The grass back there was long again. It rolled down toward a small creek, wild and thick and full of life. His phone buzzed. A text from his boss. They needed a location for a new jungle sequence in a major studio film. Something lush, something overgrown. Somewhere that looked like nature had taken back what belonged to it. He looked at the grass rolling down toward the creek. He looked at the fireflies. He looked back at his phone, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. The trucks arrived on a Tuesday morning. 3 of them, massive and mud-spattered, emblazoned with studio logos. By noon, his modest property had transformed into a film set. Lighting rigs rose above the tree line. Crew members in headsets swarmed across the grass he'd been fined for neglecting. And when the director emerged and announced that this location was perfect, absolutely perfect, the neighbors gathered on sidewalks. Margaret appeared within the hour. She marched straight toward him, clipboard in hand, face flushed. She demanded to know what was happening. She demanded permits. She demanded he stop this immediately. He just smiled and pointed at the paperwork. Location scout, professional crew, fully permitted through the city. And that eyesore she'd been fining, currently earning him $3,000 a day. The filming ran for 9 days. By the time the trucks rolled out, his lawn was trampled beyond recognition. But the checks had cleared. Every fine the HOA had issued was paid back, plus interest, through a lawyer's letter. Margaret resigned from the board 2 weeks later. Word spread that she'd listed her house. He let the grass grow again after that. Longer than before, wilder. And this time, nobody said a word. Not about dandelions, not about weeds. not about anything. Sometimes the things they call violations are really just invitations. Invitations to stop caring what the neighbors think. Invitations to let the wild in. And maybe that's the real question, isn't it? Not whether you can beat the HOA, but whether you're brave enough to stop fighting on their turf and start building your own. Thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe the channel to watch more videos.